Johnston, welcome, and we appreciate you putting up with us today. We hope you had a good visit, and do you have anything, how's everything gone so far?
It's been a great day and met a lot of awesome people. Thank you for your hospitality. It's been a very beneficial day. It's been a lot of affirmation and confirmation. Everything I'd heard about the community and the folks that work here have been very hospitable, and it's just really been impressive, and I'm proud to say that I took part in this today. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, we hope you got plenty to eat. I think you stated at breakfast this morning you look like a 10,000 calorie day.
At least.
And we looked over your resume, and is there something you'd like to tell us about your resume?
Well, I think I have some diversity of experience there that has prepared me along the way. Even back beginning in 8th grade, worked at a local radio station and in hometown, and you know, came through that. You learn all sorts of different experiences and public relations and working with folks, and that was good. And then in sports medicine staff, things that weren't on the resume because it didn't pertain necessarily to the position, but it was still opportunities that provided me skill sets and opportunities to learn and see people and different things there. Was a student athletic trainer at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga through that, and worked as a student trainer at the Chattanooga Center for Sports Medicine. And then of course the other work you know, that I do through church work and different things. It's just created a situation where, in addition to what you see on that resume, you know, really it's been the last 25 years working with people and helping people solve problems, and I've learned that people are what this whole world's really about, both adults in education and students. So it's been a neat experience, and got to enjoy a lot of experiences like that as it's come together to give us different opportunities.
Okay. You were speaking of your resume. Can you enlighten us a little bit about your doctorate in divinity, I guess it would say, or explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, I
How
have
it fits in.
Sure, I have an EDS, Educational Specialist degree in Classroom Teaching and Instruction through Lee University, and then I decided to pursue, take a next step, and I did get a doctorate degree at Covington Seminary in North Georgia, and it is a doctorate of ministry in Bible, and just to kind of complement the educational experiences I had. And there were actually some of the coursework that, you know, also included some things in leadership and those kind of things, because, you know, both in education and in the other avenues of work as well, and helping people, it's still meeting people where they are and helping them, and you know, helping those people become successful and those things. But that's what that's in. It was a doctorate program there through Covington Theological Center.
Okay. What is your philosophy of education, and how do you think it would align with our school system?
You know, where I came from is a small rural setting, and really just testimony of what, when people get their hands on somebody through education and keep believing in people and keep learning. Where I am today is just by the good Lord's grace and those kind of things. You know, I promise you, if you ask my first, second, third grade teacher, they may still come in and even protest, because you know, my first grade teacher just came alongside me, struggling to learn how to read even, and it used an egg timer to put beside me so I could finish assignments the same time as other students and those things. So my philosophy is real simple. Let's not give up on students. Let's not give up. They need us, and our society needs us to provide a quality education for them. And what I think our obligation to do there is to make it excellent. And I think that fits in on your website. You said a commitment to excellence. And I think there's two words there. Excellence is the word that jumps out at everybody, but more so it takes a commitment. It takes a commitment on everybody, the classroom teacher and paraprofessionals that are in the trenches every day with them, all the way up through the director of schools and the board and everybody in between. It's got to be a commitment, and that doesn't just happen on the first day of school and the last day. It's a year-round commitment and an investment in our society and in our community in the years to come. Begins and ends with our students.
Anybody feel free to jump in. I'm just kind of taking the lead here. What do you think your strengths are to attain that?
Well, there's 2 or 3 strengths, but I think they all tie together. One would be a work ethic. You know, I just believe you work hard. We were raised pretty simple. There's 2 days a week we're going to work, the days we feel like it and the days we don't. And that's just how we were raised. And that's not to say we're not ever under the weather, but really, you know, it needs a work ethic. And there's work to be done, and this work is very important. 2 is a passion to see people grow and be the best they can be. And that goes for teachers. I want to help them be successful by providing them the resources they need, but also I want them to be as good as they can be. Teachers want to be successful as well, but sometimes our teachers feel discouraged in the world that they're in. Some of the changes over the last decade have been difficult, so we want to come alongside them. But also that passion to do that as well. And then the biggest attribute, I know my leadership, I'm visionary, but that means we've got to have hands on the ground, feet on the ground, hands working to come alongside and make that vision become a reality. And you've got that. You've got principals, assistant principals, teachers, paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, bus maintenance people, that they do already have that commitment to excellence. So it's just important that we share with them that vision and then get buy-in, and then we work together. But this is not just a superintendent thing. It needs to be a all of us kind of thing where we work together, and that visionary is one of the leadership styles that I would have as well. And lastly, I would say I'm not afraid of change, but also don't believe in change just for the sake of change. Let's study the problem. Let's see how we need to work the problem or the solution or move the organization the direction it needs to go. And then again, we're not afraid of change, but let's not just change to say we changed.
How would you compare Hamlin County with Ray County?
I think if you just drove through the communities, you would see similar demographics in the sense of probably your population and those things. It's just larger. It's just a little bit bigger. It compares to our neighboring county across the river very well as well, because it has the interstate that goes through it. So it's just it's a Ray County type situation with just in a larger setting and those kind of things. But what I've seen today, I've seen the adults are very much the same. The teachers are the same. They have a passion to do well and be successful, and it just seems very similar. It's just larger.
Do you have an idea about our poverty level in Hamlin County?
I've looked at just a little bit, but I mean, I couldn't tell you the exact percent, and that's okay, because that's one of those, I mean, you know, I don't mind to tell you
I'll
that.
ask you this, what is Poverty County and Ray County?
Well, it depends, because we switched to that direct search. Some of our schools used to be as high as 99%, one school was, and now a lot of our schools are down 53%, 60%, talking about our students, and you know, when it used to be based on another way to calculate, now they use that direct certification, and all of the schools, that comes in a little lower because it basically goes by the number of people that are receiving food stamps and those kind of things, and that's the number it comes through. So
we're about 60%, isn't that right? You 67, 60 or 70?
Yeah, and we've got a school that's still 63. I want to say we've got 3 or 4 schools, because all the principals they're Title I schools, so all the principals are always keeping up what the other 2 schools are, because they want to make sure they're not a teacher short and the other school, you know, doesn't get that and those kind of things. And they all get along and have a great relationship. But we're right there, you know, anywhere from 53 on up. And like I said, one school was in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago.
How about your ELL?
Yeah, it's a growing population. We have a migrant workforce. And what we've done in 4 of those elementary schools recently was they actually talked to those parents, and we put them all in one school and used a busing system to get them there, so that we were having, because of resources, ELL population, we were half a day. Teachers would be at one school half a day and go to the other school half a day, and what we were able to do was bus those to one of the elementary schools and keep them there. But now it's not as high as here. As I talked to one of your teachers earlier today, and you know, one school's about 60%. We're nowhere near that, but it is growing over the years. And
overall, it's about what, 10%?
I would say, give or take, margin of error being 3%, it might be 10, but I'd say it's closer to 7.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Clyde. We're kind of going through an outline, so we ask
Absolutely.
fair to everybody. And go ahead, Clyde.
Think of a problem that was brought to you recently. What was the problem and how did you handle it?
Well, I think that ties in just exactly with Mr. Gibson's question as well. I had a principal call me with a problem the other day, and we ended up dealing with that problem. Her problem was she's very high in 2 of the grade levels, and rather than deal with those kind of things on the phone, I said, hey, can I come up tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? I went and met. She explained her whole situation, and she was thinking that she was needing 2 more teachers, but in reality, under the BEP and those things, she had the teachers allocated. She thought one of the other schools was dealing with that from a personnel standpoint. She had just chosen to use 2 of her teachers in more of intervention type roles instead of classroom teachers and those kind of things. So one, I wanted to make sure she knew I listened, and I listened to her and respected her, and then I encouraged her to get with our director after that and go ahead and start planning for 18, 19, but I was able to explain to her the formula and those kind of things, and she came away. And I would just off that tell you, recently we also had a student issue. Principal called with an IEP, a parent called rather with an IEP issue and a concern. And I listened to the parent, agreed to check into it, followed up on that, and we have scheduled a meeting to make sure that IEP is being followed. So the parent got a return phone call, and she thanked me for that. And so the parent felt valued and respected, like we want to make sure that we know they are, and they are. And so we'll have that meeting coming up to make sure we're in compliance with it.
Tell us about the most important decision you've made recently and explain how you involve the people who would be affected by the decision.
I told my wife I felt led to apply for superintendent of Hamlin County.
Oh, okay.
But if you're talking about a school issue, I think from a curriculum standpoint, our ACT scores haven't been what we want them to be, as we all chase that 21, the state goal, and those things. And I sat down with our director, and then I went to our high school staff, who's a fabulous administrative team and their main curriculum person. So I called a meeting with that assistant principal at the high school and our 2 middle school principals, and I said, what are you seeing that ways we can attack the ACT and those things? Because a lot of people don't realize the ACT, what's on the ACT is largely all covered by the end of 8th grade and those kind of things. So we came up with a practice test, a full-length practice test that we offered this year in 8th and 10th grade in October. We may change the date in 18, 19, and those things, but we involved those people. I wanted to hear from the principals. What are they seeing? How is that going to affect your schedules if we do that? How's the best way we can do that? So we did offer that full-length practice test for 8th and 10th grade. I hope to expand that to 9th grade next year, but again, I'm going to involve their input because I want them to be involved. Now, off of that, one of the things that was there was we set goals for each student. We're not really looking at that test. We're going off the research that shows multiple test takers tend to go up as much as even out in West Tennessee and Collierville schools, they have some folks working and tracking data. They've had students go up significant numbers. But what we're doing with those 8th grade, 9th grade students is we're not worried about the overall score as much as how many questions in each subtest they got correct. And then what, if we can get 2 more questions, from 8th to 9th, and 9th to 10th, and then 10th to the real test in 11th, it can be the difference in lots of homes because those parents might see their students all of a sudden be getting 21. And if I was a student and you told me I had to go from a 16 to a 21, I might see that as unattainable. But if on each subtest you told me I just need to get 2 more questions right this year and work hard and answer the ones we need. So we've attacked that, the decision that was made to give that practice test to try to attack one of our curriculum issues.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Dr. Sodney?
Thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
It's very nice meeting you. Very impressive resume. So, and taking time from your busy schedule, being an assistant director and everything, we're very happy that you're here.
Thank you.
Some of the stuff I'm going to ask, you have those questions that we're going to ask when we're here, but I'm going to have a couple more questions.
Sure.
If I could. First one is, tell us about your experience in developing a long-range plan for a school system, or briefly discuss a few of the more important parts of the plan.
Okay. Being the assistant director right now, of course, we, at the director's bidding and those kind of things, who is a great leader and does a great job. Our long-range plan right now is largely tied to E-Plan, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But in the specific components we've attacked at the elementary level would be our proficiency or mastery targets in ELA and in math. But we are working hard at the graduation rate and then the ACT. Those would be the 4 that I would just briefly mention that we've set out long-range goals. And again, we've tried to break those down in increments because we feel like getting from this number to this number is a big leap, and then if you don't get it, you feel defeated. So we've gone back and tried to stagger that and staircase that to where our staffs and our students would feel like they could reach that, that's attainable, keep that motivational carrot there, and those kind of things, so they can reach those goals and then move up. So it's through the E-Plan largely, and then we are working to kind of separate the elementary supervisor, myself, and I've talked with the director about separating from E-Plan a separate specific strategic plan to work with the board there, and but that's in its infancy because right now largely our E-Plan is in our strategic plan, and of course I would take that through the director of schools, being in the role as assistant director. And then the last one in all grade levels would be in our plan is our attendance rate, and the state's addressing chronic absenteeism and those kind of things. We're finding ways to both positively try to get students and parents to see the value of being in school every day, and then without everything associated with attendance being negative if you don't come. So we're trying some ways there to get them there.
I mean, as far as making plans and everything like that, have you had any chance, because obviously you're not part of Hamlin's system right now, but have you looked at it, at least a cursory view of it? Have you looked at it to see, are there things that you think that could be improved, things that we could attack, things that you think you foresee in the long term? What are the issues that we have?
I've looked at some data from Hamlin County. Went back to the 15-16 report cards and looked at some things just to try to get a general view of some strengths and some areas to strengthen and those kind of things. So, but as I told administrators earlier today, one of the things that I think would be really important to do, a number is a number and we can't ignore data, but I'd want to sit down with your administrators as well, because there's usually a story behind those numbers. It could be all sorts of things and factors in that. But as we looked at that data, and then I did look at some 2017 spring data that was available. Our districts are comparable right now in proficiency rate. Your district's a little higher in some categories, ours may be a little higher in others. So I would want to hear them and hear the stories behind those and see what already solutions, as I explained to them, they're experts that you've entrusted to be in those buildings as the instructional leaders and those things. And I would want us to attack those as a group, as a team, rather than the Lone Ranger riding in, because they're in the trenches every day and know those. But I've looked at some of those, and like I say, before I said it looks like this is a strength or this is a weakness, I'd like to almost hear the story behind what they're seeing so we can work on that together.
Great, thanks, Naz. How have you used planning and goal setting to improve your school system? It kind of ties to what you were saying already.
It does, and that goal setting individually for students on the ACT would be one. Also, we are using those goals through the RTI classes. It's how the high school, middle school is going to use that to help those students specifically, because again, that's more motivating if they know they only have to get 2 more questions correctly and those kind of things. But I would also want to mention, one of my passions is helping not only our students, and they're first and foremost, but helping our adults. Most all school systems are probably the county's biggest employer as far as the county government and those things. So we want to help our teachers. We want to help our parapros that are working hard every day. And we went in, one of my passions is going in or helping teachers, or administrators rather, go in and help teachers be successful by helping coach them up and those kind of things. So one example was I went to the middle school and was asked to go there and to be a curriculum person and teacher observations. And that first year, there were 14 teachers that were level 1 teachers out of about 38. And through being in there and working with them and coaching them up, that next year, only one of those remained a level 1. Most all of them came up at least to a level 3. And so I think the goals are important to help the district. If you help everybody involved, then ultimately the student learning goes up. So not only do we want to set some sort of goals and measurable goals for the students, but let's also help the adults. Let's help the teachers be successful.
Time out real quick. Did you leave that door propped open?
I did.
There's a sign over there. It's locked, and to come around to that door, just leave it propped open. I think I heard somebody come there. Sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Sapp.
So, and I think this is an important one, question for me, and that is, how did you obtain the support of the board, staff, and community in development and implementation of your plan? I mean, as you know, there's a lot of facets that goes into being able to get this plan going. It's just not what your vision is, but the board vision is. There's so many interconnected things, and sometimes it's hard to get everybody on the same boat. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas. And
well, I think communication is 3 words, and then I may go back and expand on them just because I don't know how to be short-winded. You're going to get a sentence on a yes/no answer probably. So 1 is communication, 2 is transparency, and 3 is trust. So I think as a director or anybody in any organization gets to know people and they see and understand heart and those kind of things. But we communicate specifically on this plan. We communicated even with the assistant principal. At high school, I began with the lead principal. I wanted the lead principal to know that I was proposing that to the assistant principal because ultimately that lead principal was there. We communicated. We all talked. We sat around the table. I didn't put out my idea till I asked them, what are you seeing ways that we can improve our ACT scores and those kind of things. And that's something that we'll just, will be assessed in the year or 2 down the road. So it was through that. Even as I went to the board and I worked with our current board, and they're a phenomenal board. They work well together. Our director's phenomenal director. And those things, but I went to them and let them know before they started hearing from the community members, hey, I hear they're doing a practice ACT and all this kind of stuff. So I went to them ahead of time so that they would know that we were having that meeting and doing those kind of things. And I try to keep them involved in all of those type of things. Of course, again, being the assistant, I always go through my superintendent and those kind of things, and I wanted him to be aware of that as well. So I think one of the questions that we always ask when you're trying to communicate is, what are you seeing, or tell me what's going on. You know, listening is as much part of communication as speaking is. So I wanted to make sure I heard from all the stakeholders involved, and as we did that, we tried to build that. So we're going to communicate with the board, and then I don't recall exactly, but I want to say that I sent an email to them, or it might have just been a report in the next board meeting following, to let them know, here's how that meeting went, and we are looking at trying to provide a practice test. And it could have been, you know, that the director also had it in his director's report and shared with them as well, as he communicates monthly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carolyn?
While we were discussing goals,
She's a big goal setter, by the way.
Oh, good.
I work in healthcare, so we strategically plan based on our mission and vision for the system, and I find it to be very successful. So I was thinking, from a personal standpoint, where you definitely all have goals and objectives, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of personal growth?
Okay. One, I'm not sitting even in this chair without a commitment to keep learning every day, and those kind of things. If it's asked in terms of, you know, where career-wise and those things, you know, I have a daughter that's 8th grade. She's going to be a freshman. You know, I'm not picking up and moving, and I'm not unpacking. Let me say it like this, you know, I'm planning on unpacking and being in the community until the good Lord guides us elsewhere and those things. So at the end of the day, it's a generic answer, and that may be bad, but the generic answer is I'm going to do whatever I feel led to do. But you ought to be part of that decision should I be selected. You know, I don't believe in behind the shady, dark decisions, that kind of thing. I went to my director, and before I get in trouble, I went to my wife, and then I went to my director when we were praying about to apply here and wanted to know. So I see myself trying to listen and do whatever the good Lord tells us to do, but this would not be something that I entered into lightly. I don't think it's a process that's good for taxpayers and everybody to have to go through all this frequently, like some districts unfortunately have to, and I know you all have been blessed to have a previous superintendent for a lot of years, and he speaks very highly of y'all and those things. So there would be a commitment there, but life does happen, you know. I mean, you know, I've got a mother that I'm certainly not going to neglect in this and all those kind of things, but at the same time, I see myself being the director of schools, should I be selected, Hamlin County, for years to come.
Well, I can tell you this, the best laid plans do not always work out the way that we want them to, and so that's why I want to ask that question.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You
And
guys-
if I could just follow up on that, let me say this, I don't see Hamlin County, and even in what I've met today, it's too good, it's not in my goals to this be a stepping stone. I'm looking for a place to, again, when I was single, and I didn't get married when I was 29, when I was single and I'm moving from coaching job, assistant coach to head coach, to this school, it was a little easier to pick up your family. But when you start picking up 8th graders, 4th graders in preschool and a wife, you know, this is not my goal at all. My goal is to come and find a home.
Thank you. You have a strong background in broadcast media. I like PR and marketing and that kind of thing as well. So the question I have is, can you share with us a recent time that you've given a speech, to what group you gave the speech, and what was your main point that you was making in the speech?
Sure. I spoke at the LEAD conference recently, in the Tennessee Department of Education 2017. It was on coaching and appropriate feedback for teachers. Matter of fact, later this week, Wednesday, I'll be giving that same presentation at the East Tennessee Federal Programs Conference. And then Friday, I'll be also sharing a speech on, or sharing 2 sessions on developing a professional development academy or a plan to grow your own teachers and those things. Back in October, and the one I'll do Wednesday, it was on, again, coaching teachers, giving feedback, helping them, coming alongside them, simple things even as the way we approach that conference, the way what we say, what we don't say, so that, you know, if you start out in a negative way, folks close down. You want them to be receptive. You want it to be a dialogue to where they're open to your suggestions and those kind of things, and it just coming alongside them. So that was the point we were trying to make, was we're trying to grow our teachers, because just like we have a commitment to our students, I think we also have to have a commitment to our teachers and our staffs.
Have you written any publications or?
I know this is going to shock you. I'm a talker, not a writer. And and I've not had anything published. However, like I said, I've provided professional development in several counties around the state. I've even, for another group that does teacher trainings, I've gone to New Jersey, Chicago, and a couple other places, and spoken at schools and provided. So a lot of those kind of things for me have come in the form of presentations, professional development, speeches, and those things, but I've not ever written anything for publication.
So what about radio shows or television shows, or are you the spokesperson for the school district when it comes to issues?
I never talk to the media unless the director of schools asks me to. He's our go-to person on that. Unfortunately, sometimes he calls me and asks me to talk to the media, you know, because he's out of town. This past February, we were one of the first districts that closed because of the flu. If you remember, lots of districts ended up having to do that. We had, I forget the number now, and he was at a conference in Nashville, so I ended up on NBC Nightly News that night, that was not, you know, when you wake up some days, that's not on your list of things to do, but I ended up on the national news that night. But also, one of the TV personalities in the Chattanooga market taught me years ago, if it's really news, you can't hide it anyways. So, you know, what you need to do is make sure that you prepare your statements and talk with them. So, I do talk to the media sometimes, and of course our local paper and an online newspaper we have relationships with, but even then I don't talk with them without going through the director of schools, and of course that may differ in each organization, but there'll be an organizational chart that would designate that to a department or a person, and we make sure we follow that. So.
And then finally, tell us how you've been successful in getting strong parental community support for a school program or district.
Okay. Let's go back to principal, and I think when I was principal, I think the parents knew this. They could see that I cared about the kids. And I think anytime that you have a reputation, and I say you, I mean a district, a board, a school, whatever the case may be, when they know their child is what the main thing is about. And we try to measure that in child benefit. Is this program going to benefit students? Is this purchase going to benefit students, and those things? I think the parents are more apt to. One of the things we did at every monthly PTO meeting, we made sure we recognized our character winners. We try to have maybe the chorus or somebody sing as well. Well, guess what? I got them there for the PTO meeting because we were recognizing their students. Now, they might not really cared what I had to say, but I also was smart. We had the meeting, and then they sang. So, you know, they were, you know, we made sure they heard those kind of things. Now, we weren't, you know, earth-shattering PTO. It wasn't an hour meeting. It was 10, 12 minutes, but they were there, and they got to hear me do that. We also had celebration assemblies every 9-week grading period in which those parents came in. And, you know, it's not that you wanted to recognize kids for stuff that wasn't what you'd say of high quality, but by recognizing students, I was able to have many impromptu parent conferences as well and do those kind of things. And that's carried over at the central office. I still get calls from parents in multiple schools because and this is not, I'm not a bragger at all, but they know I care about the students, and they know I'm going to listen to them and respect their opinions. So we've got support by just stressing the positive things that are going on. All too often, the only time folks hear about things in the schools, unfortunately, when we have something negative go on. So we try to stress the positive, and then we stay focused on child benefit. And then I think part of that goes back to the other word from earlier, trust. I think they have to know that we're good stewards with what they've entrusted us with, and while the taxpayers entrust us with money and everything else, there's not one thing more precious we've been entrusted with than those students every day. So I think when we put the children first, that helps build that support.
Now, what's your best mechanism for seeking input from parents and students?
I think it depends on your setting a little bit and what you're actually doing that. Of course, with email and technology and those things, they have all sorts of ways to do that. We also have some surveys. There's actually some groups out there that have sometimes even surveys that help teachers and those kind of things. But I think being visible is very, very important. So, you know, I had lots of times parents come in, they didn't have to have an appointment to talk with Shane. You know, they come to the door and they're upset, or if they're crying, they're going to come in. And countless times I've got up from around the desk and I went and sat down beside them. I wanted to know I was in the trenches with them, not looking across the desk at them and those kind of things. So, you know, we just encourage that. Call me anytime. And I mean, I still get calls now that really probably, that I have to deflect back to the principals because they know I care about the kids. So, but they'll call me, hey, who should I call? I'm mad about this. I'm concerned about this. And we point them the right direction just because it's open door. Even earlier today, I gave all the administrators my cell phone number and those things. I actually gave them Mr. Kinder's number, but but I I gave him my cell number and said, you may have questions over this in the next 2 or 3 days that you think of or want to, you know, and I've actually had a couple text me this afternoon. So I just think being open, because we're in the people business. I mean, this cannot be hide behind doors type business. This is a people business and student business and teachers.
Well, thank you for your answers, and
Thank you.
I really appreciate you considering our school district as potential.
Thank you.
Come to work. Thank you.
I feel honored to sit here. Thank you very much.
Roger Green.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Will you demonstrate high visibility in the schools at the various school functions?
Yeah, and I think with 18 schools, we do that, we try to do our best to do that now. You know, and with 18 schools, you've got to do that. I mean, you have to be visible in the community and those kind of things. I think you have to kind of create some parameters, because the one thing you don't want to do is be at one significantly more than you're at another. So you have to have equity and try to be at those events, and I try to communicate that now. I try to let the principals know, hey, I can't be at your event tonight because I'm at this other elementary schools thing, and I put out a schedule kind of with those principals. Again, there's just 7. But we want to be visible, and I think that's where you build relationships is, you know, aisle 7 at Walmart and those kind of things happens a lot, you know, because you are visible, and you might not be able to solve it right there, but you can certainly at least have that conversation, say, call me tomorrow in the office, and we'll look into that, or I make a note on my phone, or even a piece of paper if I have it. You know, sometimes we can break down, use pencil and paper still, and I'll write down a note and then check up on it. And then I think you got to be true to your word. I think you got, if you tell them you're going to check on it, you got to call back. But you've got to be visible at schools.
So if you need to maybe visit one for 15 minutes so you can make others, you have no problem doing that.
Well, as you can see, me stopping and talking to anybody for just 15 minutes is tough, but that's optimistic, but I don't have a problem doing it. I don't see going to the schools. Matter of fact, now even, there's 3 of our schools one's within 2 minutes, one's within 7, one's within 9, and if I've got an hour, I may break away just to go and swing through the office or swing through, hey, last time I was there, I didn't get to go down the 4th grade hallway, and I may not interrupt a class or anything at all, but I just want to be seen. And a lot of times it's for staff, but other times it's for no other reason. The parents coming in to check a student in or out, hey, he's out and about and he knows, and our director does a great job of that as well.
All right, how will you work with the board if you're selected to be effective, make good decisions, and be respected by the community? I guess that's just kind of following what we're already talking about.
Yeah, I think one, obviously we're going to implement as you know, the policies that you all put in place. We're going to make sure those are followed and implemented. That's what I currently do. As an example, I went through our policies, current policies, and we have about 294 of them right now. And we've set up a schedule for annual review. You know, on those policies it says to be reviewed in so-and-so months. So we've recently set up that schedule, and we're going to specifically give those out every month to be voted on, to say they've been reviewed. We're going to work together to form policy that both is compliant with federal law, state law, and other board policies, but also that reflects the norms and values of your district. Sometimes those policies go above and beyond what the law requires because you want your district to exceed those expectations and those
Ray
things.
County, are you signed up with TSBA for?
Like the updates and those kind of things. Yes, we get those updates, and I usually review those, and then I take those to our director currently, and just basically say, you know, here are 3, and like the other day, and I don't remember the number, but he said we're just not doing that when it doesn't agree with our norms in our community, and it wasn't one that affected law, so we just laid that one to the side, and I wrote on the top of it, you know, not to take to the board. And then what I will do is I prepare those policies, and I will type or insert our name and all those kind of things, and then it goes out in a packet a week ahead of time for them to look at for consideration, and then I usually am there to answer those questions with them and those things. So we want to develop that policy together, but main thing from your chair, obviously, is to make that policy, and mine's to make sure that we're doing it. If you all pass it, we're going to make sure we do that. So at the end of the day, in that role with policy, I always felt like my job was to do 2 things. Bring any recommendation that was sound, and then know that, you know, so that both the director and the board was viewed in such a way as bringing something that was pro-students, pro-employees, and, you know, limited the backlash that may come. Obviously, you know, you never blindly was handed a policy. It was out in the packet a week ahead of time, and there's been times it was talked about in the workshop and pulled aside for them to have a special workshop about it and those kind of things. I didn't get emotionally connected to the policies. I just presented them and then followed the wishes of the board.
How would you communicate with the school board members between regular meetings?
I think it's multiple ways, And some of that depends on personalities. It could be that Mr. Grigsby wants an email weekly. Dr. Sadnia may want a phone call. It could be that, you know, everything. So we're going to communicate frequently. In regular settings, that's going to be something I've been known to put out what I used to call the WAG, is a week at a glance. When I was principal, I would do that. And I'm sure all principals have some sort of little notification like that to let you know. During the monthly meeting or the director's report that I would send out, I would give you, hey, here's where I went this month. Here's what I know I've got these other months. And then during any kind of situation or an emergency, you're going to get a call from me very quickly. It could be that if it's something so urgent that I ask Miss Ava, notify them we have a situation at this school and I'm going to deal with that situation or you know, take care of that, and I will call them with more details as fast as we can. So, but I think a large part of it, I would one-on-one. You know, I know that in many cases it would be that some people prefer a call, some people prefer an email, some people because of schedules, you know, and those kind of things. So I would work that individually out. But the same thing with going to the schools. I'm going to do my best to give all 7 people equal access and opportunity so that I'm not just communicating, as an example, with you more than I am the others. I want to make sure I'm involved.
Well, I'd follow up with a little different one. What if we got a different opinion here between the board members on the issues that may come up? How are you going to deal with that?
Well, I think we need to, again, let's just say the board needs to be just like the other stakeholders. I need to reach out to the board members, find out where you're coming from, those kind of things, and then we're going to work through that just individually because, you know, that's going to happen at some point in time. And the one good thing that I've heard from you all and some of the people about y'all today, but I won't tell you which principal said that. No, I'm just kidding. And what they said was this board has a commitment to get back together apart, you know, as far as and find out, work it out. And even if you disagree, large times you're going to be able to say, hey, we're all still going to go eat after the meeting and those kind of things. Because just like a parent, sometimes a parent doesn't always see it the way the school does or handle it the way that we wish they would. At the end of the day, they care about their baby, and we wish they might do it a different way, but we're going to listen to them, we're going to respect them, and we're going to try to get that reconciled.
Well, it's rare, but occasionally we have a different opinion, not very often.
I understand.
Sure, what do you say? Well, I think what you were talking about, Dr. Johnston, is we try to say what's best for the kids.
That's it.
And that's the bottom line.
That's it. And there's usually common ground, even when you don't agree, so to speak. There's what common elements are in those kind of things, and that we can work towards a solution so that we can get something, whether that's policy or a program, in place for the kids.
Now, you mentioned we have 2 assistant directors here today. How many do you have? Just one?
2. There's
Two.
basically there's 2 of us that he's assistant director, elementary supervisor. I'm assistant director, secondary supervisor. And again, our central office staff's, you know, pretty small, and, you know, because of resources, budget, and those kind of things. So that's
What is your annual budget this last year?
$33, $34 million. So,
We're about 100 million.
yeah, I talked to your finance person earlier today, and I think it ended up about 97 this past year.
Some of you help me out here. Your old position, your assistant director, you handle water. And then Dr. Dean was water, but it is water. You did more
Mr.
facilities.
Smith is curriculum and instruction. I'm auxiliary services, policies, capital projects, transportation, food service.
Okay. So you divide yours up, then you do all those for the.
Those are
secondary.
curriculum, that secondary, but like I have homebound, I have professional development, I have the policies. The other gentleman, Mr. Puget, does a fabulous job. He deals with some of the personnel type issues, and I don't mean if we have an issue with personnel, I mean a lot of the stuff with 10 Compass and licensing and those kind of things. Our director mainly handles facilities in a small district. He ends up with sometimes a lot more of the job descriptions on him. When I say facilities, I mean strategic planning for buildings and maintenance and renovations and building projects. But again, in his 9 years, we've built 1 school. It's a high school, about a $34 million high school. But that really has alleviated overcrowding about everywhere in our county right now. And another 5 to 10 years, we'll have to see. So there's projects there. But then we have our bus supervisor also wears a maintenance hat, so to speak. He oversees some of the maintenance people. We have a materials supervisor that has some of the maintenance responsibilities, but neither one of those are certified teacher positions. They are just people that are in those positions.
Thank you. Good.
I'm good.
All right, Mr. Griggs.
example of when you change your mind on an issue and take a different course of action as a result of listening to others?
My wife would probably tell you I've not ever changed my mind, but, what, you know, it'd be nice if we'd learned from our successes more than we've learned from some mistakes in life. But when I was elementary principal, I first, got that job at a pretty young age, and I thought I was supposed to be the guru on everything. And the state had some surveys out and those kind of things, and some of those surveys were telling me our teachers were begging to be more involved in decisions, whether that's changing the schedule, bell schedule, whatever. So that was when I actually, and I think it was in the principal meeting this morning, we started working to implement the professional learning communities, and we involved them in every decision. So rather than a specific incident, I just started getting our faculty plugged in, because they years and years of experience and the wealth of knowledge is in the building already. And so we had PLCs for everything from pacing guides to some other curriculum choices, even to the point that when we got ready to hire the next spring, I started using grade level reps from each grade level to sit in on interviews, and they had scoring sheets, and then they would turn those in to me as part of a factor in the decision. Ultimately, I would still make a decision on who we hired, but I think just as far as changing my mind, I changed my mind in a leadership style. It wasn't supposed to be about me, it was supposed to be us working together, and that's when our scores also made a great turn and came up, and those kind of things, along with some other factors. So that, and along with, we made an academic decision at one point in time. Teachers felt like they were losing a great deal of instructional time, and it was an issue that dealt with homework in our upper grades in the elementary school, because sometimes folks give homework just because they're teachers and they think they're supposed to give homework. And what we were finding was, as math and some other subjects were getting harder, we had parents that were trying to help with homework, but our teachers were spending a great deal of time having to undo what was done the night before. And we sat down and I listened to teachers, and we came up with a plan of, we developed a maximize 8 to 3 day, so that we moved away from homework for grades to more of a guided practice at night. In those 4th and 5th grades, it was just the 2 grades that we did that. And I actually had a mom come in, and she was in tears. She said, "You've eliminated the kitchen crying and the arguments at our table every night." And I said, well, it wasn't me. As our teachers coming and saying how much time they were losing having to undo what was been done incorrectly the night before. So they started sending home study guides and then maximizing their day 8 to 3, but that was a result of me listening to them. Channel 3, Chattanooga, actually ended up coming up and doing a story on that at that school, and it was very positive at the time.
And you may have touched on this next one. Of course, if you're selected, what avenues are open for you to listen to concerns of employees, students, parents, and community? And how do you plan to have the time available for everybody involved?
Yeah. One, I think you have to look at your organizational structure, and sometimes you have to look at all the different moving parts, as was mentioned earlier in that. So it could be that it's my ear directly, lots of times. It could be that it's other people's ear that are part of this team of leadership. Specifically, like I said today, I've given my cell phone out today, so I'm not bashful about sharing that. And what I found, I've done that for years, and what I found is you get worried somebody's going to blow your phone up and that kind of stuff, but as a general rule, people only call when they really have a concern or something they feel like they need to share. So one is being transparent and open, whether that's I give them contact information, and repeatedly email us those things. I think it ties into Mr. Green's question as well. You need to be visible at schools, and that may be faculty meeting for teachers to share thoughts, concerns, anything. That may be PTO meetings or some other sort of meeting in which open house situations to where you're there so people see you. And the more you're out, the more opportunity people have to see you and share those concerns. But I just think part of that would be sitting down and looking strategically at our organization or leadership team so that they have an ear to the director, whether even if it can't always be my ear. But we'd work together to make sure, because a lot of times a lot of good ideas come from folks that sometimes have them but don't feel like they have an avenue to share them.
You good, Mr. Grigsby?
Yeah, for right now.
All right. Janice Hall.
What do you consider to be your major accomplishments as a school administrator?
Oh, I think above all else, it's our, it's when you look back at those kind of things like I shared today. It's when you see them being citizens productive citizens, and just, sometimes that's college graduates, sometimes that's engineers, sometimes that's some coming back. So one of the greatest joys when you see teachers. My daughter right now is playing middle school basketball for a young lady that played basketball for me, and she's finishing up her degree at UTC. And from, she raised in a rural setting, and really wondered if she'd ever go to college or anything like that. And so those are wins. Now specifically, I think that it's an accomplishment when you see instruction getting better. When you go back and see those teachers that were struggling and almost burnt out or frustrated in level 1, and now they're turning out better years and those kind of things. So anytime you see improvement in instruction, it helps. I think when you change culture, I think it makes you feel like that, and I've been in some situations that were maybe negative culture in buildings, and some of that was because of discouragements, feel like they're getting beat up by everybody all the time, the state or central office and those things. So when you come alongside people, so some of the major accomplishments are things like, and I shared with some of the board members earlier, when I had that surgery back in 2014, a major accomplishment is knowing that you have built an atmosphere and a culture that is about caring about each other and looking out. I had that surgery, and I was in intensive care for 2 or 3 days, and then hospital the rest of the week. And that next Monday at 3:15, there was a knock on the door, and my wife went to get the door as I was recovering in the other room and those things. And it was 2 of our high school basketball players that said, "Hey, Coach can't play with kids this week, so we're going to play with them for him." And they came every day, Monday through Friday, for 4 weeks, 2 different ones every day to play with those. So that's a major accomplishment that won't ever show up on a state report card and those kind of things, because that's a compassion, that's a caring for another that our world desperately needs, and that's something that we'll see in the years to come. And they'll be doing that in our county and our community for years to come. And so those kind of accomplishments matter to me as well.
How would you utilize the expertise of your staff to create an atmosphere in the schools that will lead to educational excellence?
I think one's a review. There's no way I can come in with answers till we've sat down with your team that you trust every day organizationally to make sure we're asking the right questions. So one, let's review and analyze the organizational chart, and let's look at that and see. Let's also go back and identify the strengths in those kind of things. Sometimes there's folks, again, that are being utilized in one way that have a skill set that maybe no one's tapped into, and we can look at that. So we go back and look at the chart, then we analyze their strengths, and then we work with them to just place people where they need to be. I mean, that's true in church. I've got some wonderful people in church that are porcupines. I'm not going to let them hand out the bulletins at the front door. That doesn't mean that there's not other places they can't serve. So it just may be that we need to find everybody's skill set and work to put people where they're both productive and happy, and because the happy employee is going to get things done there as well. So when we do that, sometimes that's clarifying job descriptions. Sometimes that's just making sure expectations. It could be that one person is doing something and think they're meeting expectations, so I would need to clarify expectations when we do that. But we want to make sure and identify those strong suits and then put people where they can be successful. Again, we want everybody to be successful, from the superintendent to all the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the bus transportation folks, the maintenance people, custodial staff. We want everybody to be successful because that's what it's about. It's about people.
What is your employee retention rate for your principals, your teachers?
Largely in our district, it's very, very high. People don't come and leave. Basically, they leave for 2 reasons. A lot of times it might be a coach that's gone from assistant coach to a head coach. But like in the last 5 or 6 years, we've had to hire, and don't laugh when we say this, it was a banner year. We had to hire 25 people 2 or 3 years ago. And but the only reason is that 22 of them were retiring and that kind of thing over the 7 schools. It's usually you come back home, and a lot of our people come back home and then they stay until they successfully retire. And unfortunately, sometimes folks have made bad choices and they have to be exited, but that's not usually the case.
There's a saying we have in our business: get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seats on the bus.
That's exactly
I like
right.
what you're saying.
Yes.
Maybe great, but they may be in the wrong spot. Janice, do you have anything else?
Not right now.
Okay. Keep on moving here. Dr. Hassan, do you have a question?
Johnston, actually, one thing, I look at your resume and everything like that, but where are you from? I mean, where were you born and raised? Ray County?
I was born in Chattanooga at the hospital in Chattanooga,
Okay.
but yes, I graduated Ray County High School in 1990, went to UTC and then finished there.
Was I just didn't know if you were born in the same county.
And then I left, I started teaching at Dayton City School in January of '96. I was fortunate enough to graduate December of '95, and they had a history spot, which, that's not common. So I started there, I was there 2.5 years, moved to the mid-state pursuing coaching opportunities. I had an opportunity to go work with Barry Wortman at Laverne High School, who still remains a very successful coach, several state championships. I was his assistant coach.
Football,
Basketball.
basketball.
That was boys basketball, but most of my head coaching experience has been in girls basketball.
You've been in administration and you've done a lot of stuff with them, so you're familiar. One of the big things is always budgeting and, and I want to change this question a little bit. I mean, the question goes, explain how you would approach developing school budget, who you would involve and how would you involve them. But I think a step further, budgeting is fine. We could come up with a budget and we've gone through it. But how do we get that budget and going through commission and county commission and, all the aspects of whether it's federal, state, and local funding, and how have you all been doing it? What are your visions of this? Because we've had a little bit of local issues as far as being tight, as far as our budgeting goes.
Sure. One, I've been involved in the budget process on the fringes, so to speak, with our director as he's needed me or asked me to do certain things. But one of the things we always do is we review the previous year's budget. Let's start there and let's see. One philosophy that he had as well was he always tried to at least base the initial budget on the revenues from this year. That way he could stay in that. He always tried as much as possible to take a budget to them being the county commission, in such a way that it either hit the board's fund balance or it didn't hit the fund balance at all, so that they were not asking for any money, so that they wouldn't have to necessarily do that. Now, that's not always available option. Sometimes you have to do that. I think that we always try to separate the recurring funds and those things from the non-recurring events, so that you knew as you build a budget, hey, this is going to be in the budget this year, but that's not going to have to be repeated next year, and those kind of things. And then also, you meet with the stakeholders as you're building it. You're going to meet with principals, department heads, your supervisors that all need different budget line items and those kind of things. And then, like as I talked to your finance person earlier today, to some extent, budgeting is budgeting. We always tried to spend the federal government and the state government's money before we had to tap, the local money and those kind of things. So, and I think part of that too, from this chair, is, sometimes some directors only show up at the county commission meetings the night they're presenting the budget. And I think part of that is being there a little more often than that, being there for the county commission meetings, building relationships and with those folks in such a way that they can see your heart's invested in their work, just like you're asking them to be invested in yours, and those kind of things. So when you involve all those people, at the end of the day, philosophically, if I had to say one thing, I think when you look at the budget, I think what your the number one priority needs to be, do I have enough teachers? Because those are the ones that are going to see those kids every day. And I'm going to make sure that need's met, and then we're going to build kind of around that. Philosophically, that's how our current director and I would talk about those kind of things. So we tried to maximize that by saying we're going to make sure that the kids have what they need directly every day, those 177 or 180 or however many days, use of discretionary days that you have. So, but I think part of that's relational as well. I think you need to be involved, you being I or us, involved in the county commission, not up in their business, so to speak, but visible, and they need to know that we care about their work outside of once a year when we go to ask them for money.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Carolyn?
What steps would you take to ensure that the school's funds are spent wisely and accounted for properly?
Yeah, and I think with this being a December situation, one thing as an example, we have a little advantage. I would want to sit down like with your financial person and let's look for inefficiencies in the budget. That's true every year. Even if I'm the one that builds the budget, you want to look for inefficiencies to see, are we getting the best bang for the buck in those kind of areas and those things. I think that's as simple as frequent meetings with that financial person. I think you need to review some monthly reports. And one way to build trust, even with commissioners and the board and everybody, is let's not hit the fund balance unless it's an emergency. You build your budget in such a way that you might have to move from one line to another, but let's not hit that fund balance, because then it looks like it's poor planning if you always are having to go back and hit your fund balance. So we want to do that. So you ensure by having those monthly reports, you try to build that, again, on the current revenues, But you always want to review to look for inefficiencies in the budget. And a lot of times when you get over to June, it could be that you had inefficiencies, but it's inefficiencies in a good way. You had too much in a line item, and you're not having to hit the fund balance at all and those kind of things. So I just think you keep your thumb on it. It's not something you build and then release once it's voted on. You gotta monitor it year round.
Roger?
Well, kind of a follow-up on that, I think each of us, we want to make sure that our money's spent wisely and we got adequate control and the accounting is maintained well, but from time to time, if you see you're going into the red, how would you deal with that?
Well, I think again, if it shouldn't catch you off guard, like you say, it shouldn't be to an emergency point by checking and keeping regular status on it, and you keep monitoring those kind of things. So one, we're gonna communicate together with the board and see where we are. We're gonna see what lines, possibly we have too much in, and then we're gonna use that as a teaching tool to build the next year's budget and those kind of things. So I think part of that is, now, again, why is it in the red? I think it's important to know. Is it because of an emergency? Is it because of something that happened that's a anomaly, it's not gonna happen every year and those kind of things? Or is it because, I messed it up and didn't budget
But you would look
enough?
at it and bring it back
Absolutely.
to aware of the problem and so we can deal with it.
Absolutely,
Right. And
absolutely.
tell us, I guess, about your successful effort to obtain outside funding other than public funds for any
Sure.
particular project. If you hit that.
Well, I think most all communities have, the partners in education and those things. I was fortunate enough as the elementary principal, I had Wattsbar Nuclear Plant is mine on the north end of Ray County when I was principal. And we have lots of those situations. We have corporations, businesses, and those things that come alongside lots of the schools that it does alleviate some needs from. And even in that case, Wattsbar actually made all of our copies. If you had your, for the year, if a teacher needed them. And that adds up to a lot of money when you start figuring out how much that is. So that's a small example, small scale of school. But again, if it's resources that teachers need and have to have, if a local partnership or business can come alongside those partners in education, that again frees up money in the board-approved budget that you don't have to provide, because I know your commitment's there, as our board is in Ray County. We're gonna give the teachers what they need to be successful. There's also grant opportunities out there, and again, I've not reviewed your organizational chart enough to know if you have somebody specifically in charge of grant writing. But I would also involve you in that process. I don't think anybody needs to be writing grants without this board at least knowing about that, so that when you get asked at church or at Walmart or anywhere else, hey, I heard y'all applied for a so-and-so grant, and that's news to you. So, as we apply for grants, we want you involved in that and to approve.
Well, I think Hamlin County is very fortunate. We've got an excellent financial director. Many of the other school systems in this area, they rely on her for advice, so
I was very impressed with her today.
she does an excellent job.
Do you have any educational, we have HC Excel here, Hamilton County for Excellence, that is a local, outside funding body that supports schools. Y'all have anything organized like that in
No.
the county?
Educational Foundation.
No, we do not.
She's the builder on that. Stop.
Yeah, I did meet, I did,
Has a
She's
short
dying to say
discussion
something about
about it.
yeah, we did meet, and you met the new director there today and talked with him, and told him even if this didn't work out, I wanted to call him back and pick his ear on some things and that kind of thing. So I think that's a great blessing that this community has, and it'll be interesting to see. We don't have anything currently like that. It's largely the businesses and corporations that come alongside our schools to help. Now, that's not always at school. Sometimes our businesses help through central office, but it's, and by central office, I mean, they make a donation to the board for a certain capital outlay project or those kind of things. And a large time, it's easier to get them involved to support something in athletics than it is in, room 2130 in one of the buildings, just as an example. But again, if they can help us with that athletic project, that does still free up the other money that we can use in room 2130 to address an educational or academic need.
Our foundation is very focused on the academics and the curriculum and like art in the classroom, and just to share that with you, that come across with grant money, so.
Yeah, and we talked earlier today, the director and I talked about the Ready by Age 6 program that they've
Right.
started, and the detail oriented that is, and that's phenomenal to have that commitment. I think that's blessed.